Take it easy, man.
Not sure you can fix the voice at this stage anymore. Yeah. So,
Hello.
hello everyone, and with our very first podcast, here's Rosen, myself, young Mad Max as we call him, and Jordan. We are working together. We're working for an online payments company. We are spending a lot of time actually working on crypto related projects in our work, but I think at least two of us are also massively invested in the space, with the third one quite fairly so as well. So we really want to speak crypto, and this is what we're going to do on our podcast today. The plan is pretty damn clear, and it is we want to go a little bit deeper into the story around BitcoinSV. Shall we start, guys?
Sure, let's go.
Good stuff. So let's start at the beginning. So what is BitcoinSV, and how did it come about? What would you say?
Okay, so BitcoinSV stands for essentially Bitcoin Satoshi's vision. It is something that came into existence as a result of a hard fork from Bitcoin Cash. Essentially, the Bitcoin Cash community was split around major kind of protocol topics. They didn't agree in the they weren't in agreement of the future of the protocol and how it should develop. So that's why Dr. Craig Wright and a couple of his how should I say it, associates decided to split the chain and to essentially recreate the original Bitcoin and called it BitcoinSV.
Well, you say that they decided to recreate the original Bitcoin. Is that a objective assessment of what they're doing, or is this more subjective and what they're really saying that they're doing?
I'd say they're more subjective in what they're saying they're doing, because Craig claims to be Satoshi. We all know that, but the proof that Craig is Satoshi is tentative at best, and his vision of Bitcoin is also, I'd say, very, very tentative at best.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a load of crap, basically. But Satoshi's vision is taking some very select parts from the white paper and then saying this is exactly how it should work with no discussion, and it's not something I'm a fan of.
And it's actually very interesting that the Bitcoin white paper is on the BSV website, as if like this is where it was born. This is how it's been presented. Like you go to the website and there you go, like the Bitcoin white paper.
It's a nice touch, though.
Yeah,
right?
Nice marketing.
Is the white paper on? It'll be on Bitcoin.org as well, though, right?
Yeah,
sure. And probably on Bitcoin Cash as well. I love Bitcoin Cash. They often point to the fact that it does say cash in the title, right, of the Bitcoin white paper.
Yeah,
to be a cash system, and so that's what they put an arrow to that. Say Bitcoin Cash.
Essentially, everyone picks the parts of the white paper that they like.
Just like listening to you guys, I just so much feels this white paper. It feels like the Bible, and then everybody has, like the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they have these versions and readings of the Bible and the interpretations. And
everyone knows that you shouldn't blindly trust one single document and never change it, as with the Bible. So it is silly saying something Satoshi vision anyway, and basing something off something that was written in 2008, and had no idea how this space was going to progress.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But I think, just as religion makes a lot of money, Bitcoin does as well, or people involved in it.
The evangelists, they make a lot of money.
Scientology as well, man.
Yeah.
That's what we're about.
So what are the key staples of that vision, right? So obviously it's an interpretation of the white paper, and there can be many of these as we're starting to see, right? What is their angle?
I'd say there's sort of two interesting parts. There's the code angle, so how they're developing the code to fit more closely to how they understand the white paper. And there's also sort of the vision, which maybe isn't to do with the code. So if I start with the vision, that is to be a very compliant, regulated blockchain. They believe that blockchains will only succeed if they work exactly in the law which is already written. I think that's very strange for them now to say that, especially since it was first advertised on cypherpunk websites, which are very anti, government and stuff, very libertarianism. And then to the code, they've done a few things. They've taken away the block size limit, and they've also reintroduced the original script coding language.
Yeah, which essentially would allow, they de-restricted the original Bitcoin script, which would allow for more kind of smart contract capabilities on chain on the BSV network. That's the idea, at least. That's the claim, I should say. So yeah, there's immediately one question that comes to my mind when you say that it's supposed to be super compliant, because Craig and Calvin, which is another person we're gonna talk about later.
The pimp from Antigua.
Yeah, the pimp from Antigua. He essentially, they claim that Bitcoin was first used to transfer gambling money across borders, right? That's what they claim. So like that kind of contradicts the original vision being it super compliant, So it's very interesting how they kind of spin things around the way they need them at the specific time.
Well, that gambling story actually plays nicely with Calvin's history, right? As a founder of Bodog and really being on the run for maybe 10-15 years because of like what happened in the US when the gambling crackdown happened. But I guess we're gonna get into that. I was gonna say, is it not very weird, and was it really the case from the beginning that actually they started with this explanation that it's supposed to be extremely compliant and that's how it should be, or did it come later?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but there's nothing in the original white paper that is specifically saying that it's going to be compliant. There's nothing. I don't think there's even the word compliance in what
No,
white paper,
definitely not. I think that once again Satoshi was sort of like vague enough that it can achieve any goal. And the thing about Bitcoin is it can do both, in my opinion, as well, which is the interesting part. You've got the blockchain that can be compliant. If you want to receive your wages and pay taxes on the blockchain, it's very easy to be compliant. We've all dealt with companies like CipherTrace and Elliptic and whatnot. But it can also be non-compliant, which can also be very good sometimes, because who is dictating what's compliant and not, and do you necessarily agree with them? So it can work in both realms. I don't think it needs to be one or the other.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that. So if we get a little bit into the technical aspects of it, where are really the differences between the other Bitcoins out there, namely Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash? How would you see the real differences in the approach with regards to how the chain is built, and what's the vision for the future of the chain?
Well, okay, so they all have slightly different visions. They all, as we've discussed before, sort of cherry pick different parts of the white paper, different emails Satoshi have sent, different posts he have sent, to explain why their sort of vision for how the protocol should work is the correct one. Starting with Bitcoin, they sort of believe in what I see as a federated system. You've got a very stable, but not exactly cheap core chain, and then any company can build on top of it, and you have certain trade-offs and certain benefits to go to basically second layer solutions. Bitcoin Cash was obviously the first fork, and they didn't like the fact about SegWit, and also the fact that the block size wasn't being increased. They, are quite similar to BitcoinSV in a number of ways, apart from they actually also do believe in second layer scaling solutions. And then, BitcoinSV believes everything needs to happen on chain, which, we can discuss the bad parts about that if you want.
So essentially, in very simple technical terms, apart from the script language that we talked about, I guess that the block size is what clearly differentiates the three major Bitcoins. So essentially, Bitcoin has a block size of 2 megabytes. I think Bitcoin Cash I think Bitcoin Cash is now at 32 megabytes, and essentially BitcoinSV. The vision of Craig is to have unlimited block size. right? So essentially, you could fit as many transactions as you want in a single block.
And the miner chooses how big the blocks are, and if you can't process that block size, you essentially kicked off the chain and you can't mine it. So he sees it as very much data center driven, which once again, there's nothing bad about that, but he also sees it as very centralized data centers. He believes that there should only be one or two mining companies around the world, and that's the free market.
You know what I'm thinking of when we were speaking about this? Like, is there merit to these different approaches? Like, does it have to be like, okay, this is the real Bitcoin and this is not, you know, like, should it be like that? Or is there merit, you know, like, for these things coexisting? Or really is it a chase for like, which is the one and then everybody else is like out of the game?
So, as we know, I am a Bitcoin maximalist, but I did read a very interesting tweet last week. And it said that if you are a decentralization advocate, then the more chains there are, the better, because that is actually the most decentralized you can get. No one will be able to shut down every single chain. And it's quite remarkable if you think about it, if all of these chains are interoperable, if that's the word, atomic swaps, all that stuff, maybe that is the true decentralization. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to have different approaches as well.
But then you know, like, in terms of this kind of, I think, very, very core property of Bitcoin, which is decentralization. You know, here we're speaking about different block sizes and so forth, but in terms of the property of decentralization or the ability for somebody to stop the chain or, you know, like, manipulate it, is it really different between those or not? Because to me it feels like that doesn't change, right? This is still the case. The question is, like, do these different approaches bring something to the table? Or do they not? You know, like
I'd say, in my opinion, it's the same principle that all projects, you know, they're essentially a fork of the same chain with different properties,
Yeah.
right? So essentially, the idea and the principle are pretty similar. Like, I'd say that it doesn't matter who who created Bitcoin necessarily. What matters is what, you know, the community gets behind. And the community is clearly behind Bitcoin and not behind BitcoinSV.
Although BitcoinSV would purely argue that is because they inherited the ticker BTC and the name Bitcoin. And
the
would,
exchanges.
And the exchanges, yeah. They would say that, if BSV was BTC, it would be...
No, I hear you. I mean, obviously, you know, like, being first is an advantage,
Well,
right?
BitcoinSV believe they're first. They believe that Bitcoin is an airdrop and BitcoinSV is the original chain.
Or they say they believe.
It's also just completely incorrect, because you can still have a node from 2013, as an example, which can still sync up to the current Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah.
There's no 2013 Bitcoin node that can sync up to the BitcoinSV blockchain. So it can't be the original chain, in my opinion. And I wish someone would ask him that.
And Craig is a master, again, like we mentioned before, cherry picking stuff. So, like, for Ethereum, he says, okay, so Ethereum won against, has more support than Ethereum Classic because it eventually got the original Ethereum ticker symbol at the exchanges, right? Which is, nonsense, because it's what the community gets behind that decides which one will be more successful and which one will not be. And so
and being first will be helpful, obviously, right? When you're speaking about community support, but that is totally normal. If something is of merit enough for people to switch over, then they would. Like, these are natural things, right?
Mm-hmm. Of course. And he claims that Bitcoin with the ticker BTC is a copy of his original code. That's what he's saying. Yeah. An alteration even of his original code.
So this fixation, like, on what was first and, what is the real thing, it just sounds to me that, it is a fixation, that is chasing after that support, and that ticker or that name or that label or a word, which to me leads me to believe that then, what are these offshoots or different chains bringing to the table? Because if they were bringing something which is valuable enough, then why do you have to explain so much that you are the real deal?
Like, honestly, I think bragging rights are very important to Craig. Like, he wants the bragging rights that he created Bitcoin. To him, that's very important, like, personally. Honestly, I think that's his main reason for that, and
Yeah.
also massive amounts of money that he thinks he can make out of all this. Because we'll get into that later, but the Tulip Trust is something that, that contains
Yeah,
a lot-
I'm
supposedly a
I'm
lot
really
of Bitcoin.
excited about the people aspect of this whole story. But I mean, what I don't understand yet really is like obviously there's differences in these chains, right? But is there value to these differences, or is there only value to the name, right? And whoever is crowned Bitcoin or Satoshi takes it all, or like these things have some value, something to bring to the table, and they can really exist together in the future.
At the end of the day, no one knows the best approach at the moment. It's still like a very new space, and I do think there is value in having these other chains purely so that you can most likely watch them fail, and it can be shown as an example of why one route is better than another route. And I have the most faith in Bitcoin partly because of Bitcoin Cash has like Roger Ver, and he is idolized, and he runs that chain. BitcoinSV has Craig Wright, which is essentially the face of the chain. Bitcoin, like I don't know whether you guys have an
It has
opinion.
many faces.
It's got many faces, and for me,
Yeah.
that is just one of the many reasons that it makes more sense. It's not this sort of like demigod structure. But I think it's still good to try big blocks, and if it does work, it's a free market, so it will do better. If it makes more sense, it should do better. No one's stopping you from. Well, fine. Some exchanges are stopping you from buying Bitcoin SV.
So that was quite a jab towards Ethereum there, though. I mean, they were speaking about not even a demigod, like a full-on god, right? So
I mean, I do think Vitalik is a liability for Ethereum.
It is. He is. But I also think that Ethereum has a lot of new faces and a lot of people that are not getting credit, but are actually doing a lot more work for Ethereum than Vitalik.
Well, I told you I'm starting to potentially become a ETH semi-maximalist. I think I told you.
Yeah, I thought you were joking.
Well, no, until they put DeFi on Bitcoin, and then I'm back.
Yeah,
I just love
DeFi is even a bigger experiment than Bitcoin itself, dude. Like it's
Yeah. Just dig flash loans. We can get into that another time.
Yeah, maybe another time. But I can already picture, a little kind of caption to our conversation, which is going to be Max is a semi-ETH maximalist. I really like that.
Yeah,
So let's speak about the people. Yeah. So we mentioned some of the names. Shall we start with Mr. Creepy? Craig, and why is he a doctor? He's a scientist or something?
so he has two doctorate degrees, I think,
Yeah, but
and he's
In
studying
what?
to get
Like in
even
maths or
more.
something?
no, one's in theology.
Theology.
Yeah, dude.
Man, how spot on was I when I said that this is about the Bible more than anything else?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, dude. He understood how to
Religion.
demigod himself. Yeah, it's all about religion. And then he also apparently has one in, I want to say something to do with computer science, but the university he said that he got it from released a statement on their website saying that he had never actually received that doctorate.
Yeah,
Which
it
the
is.
one in theology?
No, I think it's the other one.
I think he received that one.
I would say that I would expect that he received the theology one, but what is the other one then?
I don't know, but it's something that has to do with computers that he says. I don't know what it is.
And he has 12 master's degrees or something.
Yeah,
There's this-
apparently he said that he claims that he has done 4 master's degrees simultaneously at the same fucking time, dude. 4
and
degrees.
has a job. And he also wheeled all of his degree certificates out in a wheelbarrow at one of the conferences and was like, I don't care what you guys think about me. Here's my degrees.
In a
In a
wheelbarrow.
wheelbarrow.
Are you serious
I'll
now?
show you the photo later.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I can't. I don't think anything, to be honest.
Yeah, so a bit more stats about Craig. He claims that he has written 1,500. Hold on. I don't know. 1,500 white papers for N-Chain. Okay, for N-Chain. 1,500 white
Which is
papers.
more than Edison. He likes to say about Thomas
And
Edison.
more than 1,000 patents. He's filed more than 1,000 patents.
But Like, what does it mean when you file 1,000 payments? It
I
means
don't
that
even
you're
know.
going
I
there
don't
and
even
filing
know.
patents every fucking day,
And
right?
it
But
also
does it
doesn't mean they're
mean does it
approved.
mean anything? Does
Yeah.
it mean that it's
I
approved? Does
could
it mean that it
file.
has any value? Like,
Yeah, but he's a stats guy, right? He wants to brag that he's like a fucking genius, right? That's what he wants. He wants the acclaim. He wants the fame of being the scientist that's like the best in his field.
okay,
I think-
okay, very interesting.
That is sort of like a bit of a, like North Korean dictator-esque. I think with Kim Jong-un, they're like, he's got a hole-in-one on every single golf course that he's ever played on every single par and everything. And there's sort of this thing with Craig as well. It's he's got 100 degrees or whatever. He's got 1,000 patents. He's an absolute miracle man. He can turn water into wine or anything. He is like a mythology to his supporters.
And what is the size of that community?
See, that's the thing. Yeah, that was what I was about to ask, and I couldn't find anything. And I've been following the story quite closely, but I can't find like any. There's
a Reddit. There must be a Reddit.
Of course, there
right?
is, but you
It's not
can't
that
trust
big.
that shit. And also, like on conferences, like I've seen, like I've never been to a CoinGeek conference, but I've seen pictures of conferences that are empty seats, and then I've seen like pictures of conferences that are full house.
Just to expand on that, CoinGeek is Calvin Ayre's magazine and mining company, yes,
Okay.
and he's the biggest supporter of Nchain and Craig and BitcoinSV. So it's sort of interchangeable. There's about 3 companies involved, and they're all
Yeah.
sort of interchangeable with the.
And this is the original BCH gang, right? So they were part of the BCH split.
With Roger, they were
Yeah.
with Roger before, and then they decided that they're going to be with Calvin now.
And would you? I mean, like, I don't know. Would you be able to say that? I mean, all these splits, they create value out of nothing because essentially I mean, it looks like it, right?
From a legal perspective, surely, yeah.
When BCH first happened, and all of a sudden there was a few $100s sitting in your account, everyone was like, that is just money out of nowhere. But do you I don't know, potentially add it up on top of Bitcoin and say that's what Bitcoin would be worth if these didn't exist? Is that money that's taken from the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Well, it definitely didn't feel like it when it
No.
happened, right?
Especially when BCH went up to half
to
of
me,
Bitcoin.
I mean, like, it feels a little bit like, okay, we did it with BCH. It was crazy that it worked. It's really like creating value out of thin air, and yeah, some people just think, okay, let's do it again.
But yeah, and also the thing that affects Bitcoin in a way though, because in the eyes of the outsiders, right, the non-crypto people, like I would quote Peter Schiff as saying, Bitcoin, why does it have value? You can fork it any time, right? You can fork it and create a new Bitcoin. if you
Silver
want.
is just a fork of gold, really, isn't it?
A whitish gold. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. That.
And can you really fork it like unanimous? Like, I mean,
course,
sorry,
I can
like
fork
just
it.
you can fork it.
Yeah, anyone can fork it, but that's the whole point about like open source
Yeah.
code. Anyone can copy that code. Like Litecoin wasn't a fork of Bitcoin, but someone, Charlie Lee, copied the Bitcoin code, made 2 number changes, and changed the script slightly, I believe.
And there we have
you've got
Litecoin.
But then a fork, I mean, there's about 10 or 15 Bitcoin forks, I think.
But-
But who could forget Bitcoin Gold?
Which actually really answers the question why this theological aspect of it is so important, right? You can fork it, but if nobody believes that you are the nuts, then your fork doesn't mean anything. So anybody can fork it, but you need people to believe something.
And going back to the community thing, every single time you see a post on Twitter about Bitcoin, there are a lot of BitcoinSV people in the chats, getting a lot of upvotes, basically discrediting Bitcoin, preaching about Craig. Whether they're fake or not, I don't know, but there's a lot of them. So it's either people supporting it or Nchain are doing a huge sort of disinformation, or both.
It's the thing is they're not obviously fake. So if they're supporting it somehow, it's well done. It's not obviously fake, but I have my doubts into the size of the community for sure.
Craig, it was actually a real shame. I got blocked by Craig on Twitter.
We all did. But,
Good.
yeah.
Before he got got banned, and it was actually a shame he got banned because it was incredibly funny.
Oh
listening
yeah,
to
dude,
him.
it was value.
But
for
there's
money,
now
for sure.
there's a Slack channel,
Okay.
which is the BitcoinSV Slack channel, which I've been trying to infiltrate for ages, but no one's given me the link.
But you met them at a conference.
So I didn't actually meet him, but I met a lot of BitcoinSV N-Chain. I met N-Chain representatives, which was interesting, and they were there, and it's a real company. And I know a lot of people that have met Craig as well when he was back in the BCH field.
But the thing is with those conferences and the people that actually work for the company, right? It's like, it's their job to promote the company.
Of course.
Like they don't care about the belief, they don't care about the real Bitcoin, they don't care about the vision. They work for
It is a
N-Chain.
business,
Yeah,
right?
it is a business
as long as
after all.
they get paid, maybe some of them believe,
But
others
where does
maybe don't
N-Chain
believe.
get its money from? That,
So yeah, that's a very interesting question. So I guess Calvin is one of the guys that has a lot of money and supports N-Chain, and also apparently Craig has made a lot of money from mining Bitcoin early. Like that's the theory at least, right?
So
And-
shall we speak a little bit about that story of like where Craig actually has so much Bitcoin but actually can't access it?
Yeah, funny story, huh? So what he claims to have done is to have set up a trust. Like he has all this Bitcoin that he's mined, but he set up, actually not that he's mined, that he has because he's Satoshi, right?
And he just set a pool a little bit like for himself, right? Because
well, he
why
would have
not?
mined it, but it would have just been tapping a button.
Yeah,
Or-
because no one else was mining it, so it's not a pre-mine, but it's also not, it's the initial mining, essentially, you can call it. It's a lot of Bitcoin, and he essentially set up a trust. But the funny thing is, he's not a trustee of the trust. So I don't even know how you can set that up, but okay, let's say you can do that. So he has trustees, but he's not one of them. So he cannot directly access the trust. And he says like it's a very kind of Italian movie style, bonded courier was supposed to come in and I think it
He
was
did
the
come,
end of
but he only had public keys, no private keys.
oh that's some pizza probably, right? That's so funny.
So can I? So is this trust called the Tulip Trust?
So, yeah,
Yeah.
That's he's.
So who
the
calls
name-
it? Who calls it the Tulip Trust?
I think he does.
BSV Bros.
He does.
Yeah, he does.
So this is very interesting because you know the thing about tulips, right?
Tulip Mania.
Yes.
Tulip mania,
Yeah.
right?
Is this a joke? Is it?
There should be something, right? Because the whole thing is cringe as it can get, right? So it's cringe. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's cringe. The whole thing is cringe.
Yeah.
It's just like so many things which are like mind blowing. And then this thing is called the Tulip Trust. Like, why is it called the Tulip Trust? When you know about Tulip Mania and what one of the biggest
Irony.
bubbles in history and so forth.
Maybe a little bit of irony, or I'm not really sure. Like Craig, taking it a step back, there's no doubt that he is clever, and there's been a lot of thought put into this.
Yeah, and a lot of work, I'd say.
A lot of work, even before people called him out for being Satoshi, because he was technically outed by Wired and Gizmo, the two online magazines, yeah. And he was outed purely because there was a blog post which he says in the blog post in 2008, I'm launching this new cryptocurrency soon called Bitcoin. So really, not something you think Satoshi would do. Like, why would you write that and then have a
Disappear.
but have a post under your own name where you say you're going to release it, but then act as a pseudonym, like a pseudonymous
Exactly.
person.
Yeah. Announce it and it disappear.
And
right?
but then they've gone back and they've looked with Wayback Machine, which allows you to see how websites have changed. That obviously that was added in 2014. It didn't exist in 2008. And there's time and time again where things like this come up.
So I have to ask, is Craig really the mad genius still in orchestrating this whole story, which comes to us like in what is it, like, let's say 2019, and Calvin is the financier?
I think you can be a genius in almost anything, and I would actually potentially call him a genius in fraud,
Which is still
it's
something.
Still a genius. It's more than most people. And then I think Calvin is a risk taker and he's
He's
a
an investor.
businessman.
He's an investor.
And I think he sees a potential return on either this being true or this being able to convince enough people that it's true. And I think he's probably quite a good risk-taking businessman. And he says, I can invest 100 million in this. It could return 20 billion, or I lose 100 million. Those are odds that he's happy to take.
And it's supposedly going to be super compliant, so Calvin might be able to get off that island.
I don't think that it's going to be the case, because Calvin's problems are not stemming or they might have been exacerbated by what's happened in the past couple of years, but they are not starting there. So I think his story really probably didn't start there, but obviously he was the founder of Bodog, right? So an absolutely massive online bookmaker, and then when obviously the whole thing went down in the US, then he fled and has been living outside the US for many years, but it was still a very kind of prominent figure, really in the shadows, but really prominent figure in online gaming, which I've been part of for a long time, and I've been to a couple of parties as well, which were very heavily advertised as Bodog parties and Calvin Ayre's parties, and pretty crazy stuff with everything you can imagine, like thousands of people, midgets, and I mean the whole lot.
A lot of underage girls.
Good parties, and supposedly him being there as well, but I haven't seen him, right? So, but I mean, definitely feels like an opportunist, and obviously it was a clear match between kind of that background for Calvin and then what happened in the crypto space, and many other people actually from gambling that we've seen, it just starts looking like you need the crazy guy to put together the ideology piece. And then you still need money in order to get this off the ground. And if these are the two main characters behind it, it just feels so obvious who's playing what part.
Yes, and you need the legit guy, which is the third guy, which is Jimmy Nguen, the lawyer, basically, right? He's always in a suit and tie. He's this Asian, super positive dude, and he's always super, open to everything. He's very friendly, and he's always super compliant in what he says. And I love when people ask him, is Craig Satoshi? And what he says is, I cannot say outright that Craig is Satoshi, but I can say that Craig is the person with the most knowledge about blockchain that I've ever met in my life. And he's the expert, and he knows everything about blockchain. So, think of that what you will, but yeah.
Which is different to Calvin, who straight up says that Craig has shown him specific stuff which hasn't been shown outright, which proves that he's Satoshi. He often says things like, I've had my lawyers look through all of this stuff Craig has and they've confirmed he's Satoshi for me and stuff, which is...
Yeah, which, I mean, actually that sounds really funny, because it kind of connects the two things. So Bitcoin was always supposed to be the most compliant thing ever, and then they had lawyers look at proof, and then the lawyers confirmed that Craig is Satoshi, which just sounds so not connected and out of sync with what Bitcoin is and what we know about Bitcoin, right? So it is not confirmed by lawyers. It is not, you don't have a guy who you trust and comes and says, this is what it is, It's just pretty crazy.
That is actually the perfect sort of segue into something that Craig uses over and over again. I don't know whether you knew this when you were saying that, but he often says that he doesn't need to prove that he's Satoshi through code, which most people would say, if you want to prove you're Satoshi, sign a message from like a really early block, move some Bitcoin around. And he always says, no, code is not law, law is law. And he's going to prove that he's Satoshi in the court of law. And then probably we can get onto this, edit the code to do stuff later on. But examples of this is he got the Satoshi white paper copyrighted and trademarked in America. So he put that in, and he apparently paid $600 to do that, and they granted him the copyright. And then he was like, this is proof that I'm Satoshi. Within 5 days, 10 other people had done it
as well.
And also got it. And the US Copyright Office had to make a dedicated page for press releases, which they'd never had before in their entire history of their website, to release a statement saying that they are not confirming that Craig is Satoshi by granting him that.
Wow.
And then
I'd say Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And if he does get proved by court of law, because obviously he cannot get proved by anything else, and let's say it's a corrupt system, and I'm not saying it is, right, but maybe he can get proven by court of law in Antigua that he's Satoshi, and maybe they're just seeing it as another kind of booster for the campaign, right? I mean, it is a campaign. It does look like a campaign.
I've often thought that sort of the end goal here is to convince people long enough that you can either exit out of this with a lot of money, or through some absolute miracle they believe that they can convince people enough that it will genuinely overtake Bitcoin. And once it's on top of Bitcoin, for them that will be proof enough that Satoshi's vision has worked, and he won't ever need to prove it. I don't think that there will ever be definitive proof. And also, you know, like a court of law saying he's Satoshi, what does that mean? Like, no one really understands crypto, especially not, you know.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, if the court of law, and let's say it is the most respected, most reputable court of law in the world, right?
Let's say the British,
and they come and they say Craig is Satoshi 1,000%. Is the Bitcoin community going to give a single, you know, like, fuck about this? I would say not, right?
No.
Am I right?
No.
I definitely agree with you.
And obviously it's not going to happen, I guess.
And the thing is, it could happen, and that is the thing, because they don't fully understand it. And, you know, I could fully understand how maybe he would be able to trick someone into saying that he's Satoshi. But it does.
But I mean, what does being Satoshi even mean, right? Satoshi, is it one person? Is it a lot of people? Is it a group? Does Craig potentially know?
That's what I was gonna ask. So, like, obviously we're saying that he is. I mean, he is quite knowledgeable in the matter. Like, let's say he's very knowledgeable in the matter,
and he's definitely one of the early people in Bitcoin. Like, we can confirm that there's a lot of facts that point out in that direction. So we cannot really say like who is Satoshi, or if Satoshi is a person at all. Like, one person, it could be a group, it could be people that never met each other, it could be a lot of people, right?
Can we assume that actually Craig was involved in the very beginning?
I personally don't think so, but one of the theories is, you know, the reason he's so adamant that he is Satoshi is because he knows that the other people are no longer able, for whatever reason, to say they are.
So he should know something.
To refuse it, essentially. There's no one to refuse it.
But I personally disagree with that. I think that he's taken a massive gamble, and it's just played off because Satoshi is either dead, maybe like Hal Finney,
or does not want to come out ever.
I don't think Craig knew about Bitcoin until roughly 2011, 2012, personally. But other people think that he was involved from the beginning and is now the last sole surviving member. So he's just taking all that.
So okay. So I guess you know, as we move towards you know, wrapping this up, I'd say, so what do you think would be the end game? How would this play out? Like, essentially, there you know, Calvin has money, but he has a limited amount of money. He cannot run this forever, right? Because he's practically the only miner that's supporting this network, right?
Are they spending money, and how much money are they burning, do you reckon, at the moment?
I would honestly say, you know, it's in the tens of millions a year for sure.
Tens of millions
because they have a lot of employees, they have a lot of lawyers, they have a lot of they do conferences, which potentially they make money out of because they're very expensive to get in. There's like 500 quid to get in.
Yeah, I've been invited. Have
you actually?
Yeah, I've been in. Well, I mean, they invite everybody that might go, right? So I didn't go.
So, you should have. Yeah, to answer your question, like, my personal opinion is, yeah, like I said earlier, one of them is that by chance, enough people believe Satoshi, BitcoinSV becomes a viable contender for the Bitcoin throne, and it's happy days for N-Chain as this company that owns all the patents on the blockchain, and therefore either license them out or prevents other people from having.
But we said, so it is all about credibility. Yeah. And credibility is not given by court of law in the general space and in the general Bitcoin community. So even if they get this, let's say they get a little bit more credibility, but it's still not enough. So where is the tipping point? Like, where and how does this become profitable for them?
I mean, potentially you could argue that it might already be profitable for them. I mean, if they genuinely have convinced enough retail investors, apparently they've convinced a lot of people in China that Craig is Satoshi. You know, if they're the only miner on the network they might actually be making money just selling these Bitcoin.
And
SVs.
also, if as we said before, like the circulating supply is not what it is because a lot of people did not claim BSV.
Especially institutions surely didn't claim
especially
BSV.
institutions, as we know for a fact
Yes.
about some institutions, then not just from a mining perspective, but then from a price manipulation perspective, they could be making money already if there's people that are in it, right?
Potentially. And then, yeah, like I was saying, either global domination must be one of their like moonshot potential exits. And another theory which I've seen floated around, which I really like, is that once he is proved to be Satoshi in the court of law, the Tulip Trust will then not deliver his private keys for some reason that will be an incredibly complex reason why it hasn't worked. And he will fork BitcoinSV again to give him access to the BitcoinSV Satoshi coins, and then we'll start messing around with those. Which would be, if he
And it's
pulls
a
that
lot
off,
of
that's
coins, yeah.
insane. And I would have a small amount.
So
of respect.
essentially, he would get access to something that he never had access to because he really managed to get everybody to back him.
Which would
Or
be
enough
insane.
people to back him.
Yeah, and
which would be
also
insane, yes.
because they control all the mining power, you would only need to convince the community. You wouldn't need to convince any miners to allow this code change to happen.
Yeah, it's very easy to do. And essentially that theory that Max can elaborate on as well, the theory that actually Calvin actually mines Bitcoin Cash, but when he mines, he has a lot of hash power, right? He has a lot of fucking computing power, and essentially he deploys the Bitcoin Cash, and then when Bitcoin SV starts pumping, he sells all this Bitcoin Cash and buys Bitcoin SV to pump it even more, and then they can dump a lot of coins that they have access to.
It very much sounds to me like maybe close to say self-sustainable story at the moment, and obviously a moonshot in the making if it does happen. Otherwise, I'd say like if they're losing tens of millions for anybody who is sensible and savvy enough, probably they would cut it at a certain point, right?
And Calvin
Calvin should be a person like that, right?
Yeah.
So maybe at the moment it is to a certain extent self-sustainable.
Yeah, I probably haven't thought about it like that before the podcast, but yeah, I do agree. It might be self-sustainable at the moment. I don't think forever it will be, but then they're basically self-sustaining with a 20% chance of them being able to just dump on BSV people, and a 0.1% chance that they overtake Bitcoin, and that's their sort of risk appetite for this.
I completely agree. I mean, I think because they keep promoting Bitcoin SV as the platform for companies and institutional investors that want to build actual applications on the chain and stuff like that. I don't believe that at all, honestly, because there's not a single legit company that's building anything on BSV. So I think their hope is to essentially convince enough people that Craig is Satoshi, and to fork out his coins and dump it on the market.
I think we managed to come to a sort of like conclusion which we hadn't had before the podcast.
Absolutely, and history in the making. So I guess it's a wrap. Thank you so much for a great conversation, and very interesting to see what really is going to come out of this.
Nice.